I was actually involved in the anti-communist movement back in the 80s in Poland, in the organization called Ruch Młodej Polski, which is youth movement against communism. I believe they contacted Polish consulate in London and they said that my passport is revoked.
From Acapulco, Mexico, this is Anarchast.
Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Anarchast, your home for anarchy on the internet. I'm here in London, here for the World Blockchain Summit, which you've got a tag on there with Steve Zedski, originally from Poland, doing a number of crypto-related things. He used to work a lot in private finance here in London. He was living in Bermuda. He showed up here recently, and upon arrival in England, they said, your Polish passport has been canceled. They took it away from him, but they still let him into the country, and so he's kind of here as a refugee, you could say, or
no man's land.
Yeah, it's no real citizenship or anything at the moment. We're going to get into that because it's a very interesting story about how easily these governments can just take away your right to travel. And I want to get into all that and some crypto stuff. You're also involved in Lieberland. We'll get into that. But the first question I have to ask you is, how did you become an anarchist?
Thanks, Jeff, for your time. It's a pleasure seeing you again in London. We met in July at the Liberland event. I was actually involved in the anti-communist movement back in the 80s in Poland. So my family was non-active anti-communists. They kind of whispered about it, but actually as a teenager I witnessed the Solidarity movement, and then I got involved in the organization called Ruch Młodej Polski, which is youth movement against communism. And so yeah, I've got a little badge of honor for sort of contributing to the collapse of the Soviet involvement in Poland. I did actually work with some prominent politicians. It all turned out slightly different to what it was, but I was always against the authority. So I was always very, very against establishment. And I came to London in '91, pretty much shortly after I could get a passport, because until '89 I couldn't even get a passport in Poland. It was literally like a gulag, slave camp. We were just anybody who believes in socialism or communism is really, really deluded, because like that leads to tyranny and enslavement. So I came to England and I started my life in England. Went to university and then got jobs, bought properties and started some businesses. And then I realized, especially 2008 was the big sort of wake up call, where a number of my businesses collapsed and things just went belly up, and I started researching about financial system and what's going on in the world, similar to kind of what happened to you as well. Mm-hmm. And I realized what a scam it is, and but I really became like calling myself anarchist when I heard about Anarchapulco, and I learned about anarcho-capitalism, and I went to Acapulco for the Anarchapulco conference last year in February. So officially I call myself anarcho-capitalist for the last couple of years.
That's great. And yeah, let's get into the story of what happened to you. So when was it you're coming back into England?
I arrived from Bermuda on the 21st of June, and that was after traveling...
this year or last year?
No, this year.
Okay.
Just 2 months ago.
2 months ago.
2 months ago. So I actually spent 5 months sailing around the Caribbean. I sailed from Bermuda to Bahamas, Florida, Cuba, Mexico, Guatemala, Honduras. And I came back through US to Bermuda to do some business, and then I had to come to London for a couple of weeks. So I traveled everywhere. No, there was no problem, and I went through US as well. I had a US visa, and on arrival, they opened my passport and they said there's a problem. We have to check. So they passed me on, put me in one cage and then another cage, and searched me and fingertipped and took pictures and photographs and started interrogating me. I mean, they were very civil. I mean, they were very, very, very nice. They gave me coffee and tea and some food, but they didn't know what's going on. And after, I believe they contacted Polish consulate in London, and they said that my passport is revoked. It's cancelled. It's no longer valid. And actually was cancelled in December. So I was actually traveling through Caribbean and US on passport which was cancelled. But I think England is becoming really Orwellian country, so they have very, very sort of strong surveillance. So they cooperated and they kept my passport and my Polish ID as well. And but they let me into the country. They said, go and sort it out. Go and speak to your consulate. So I did go to consulate after like 2 or 3 weeks trying to get hold of them. And they said, well, we don't know. He showed me the screen and he said, your passport is not valid. The governor of district of Gdańsk cancelled it, and he said, we don't know why. You're not wanted. You're not. There's no arrest warrant or there's nothing against you. We just don't know. All we can do, he said, is to issue you a 3-day passport to go back to Poland. But he said, when you go to Poland, and he was like, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, he said, but you've been banned from leaving Poland. So if I went to Poland, I would be literally arrested, interrogated, and imprisoned, and probably tortured, and, well, not tortured like in the medieval times, but for me, spending time in cell is a torture, and definitely extorted, because I don't know exactly what's the situation, what the problem is, but I think it might be something to do. They came up with some alleged debts that I owe to the Polish government, and they want to extort the money.
Yeah, it's very typical actually nowadays of many countries doing this. The US just came out and said if you owe more than $50,000 worth of tax, your passport will be revoked. And apparently there's about 3 million people who currently owe that amount that haven't paid it yet or whatever. So that's about 3 million people that will not be able to travel outside of the US. They're doing that more and more, and I've heard so many kind of horror stories about here in England arriving at the airport from many people. One person had a St. Kitts passport, and St. Kitts has what you call a investment citizenship by investment program, mm-hmm. and numerous countries do it. They don't have a lot of money, so they're basically selling their citizenship. And I think it was about $200,000 or $300,000 to get it. And the person who got it showed up here in England, and they looked at it and they said, St. Kitts passport, were you born there? And he said no, and they said, we're not accepting it. You bought this passport. It's like, well, that's basically what you do with all passports in one way or another, right? Mm. You're essentially getting it for doing something, whether it's moving there or investing or whatever the case. But they really appear to have it really down well here at least the London airport, where I've heard numerous people. They're all connected to all these databases and stuff. But that's fairly, the fact that you've had your passport revoked. They haven't told you why. If you do go back, you cannot leave the country. Very strange set of affairs that you found yourself in here.
Yeah, and I've done some research as well, and there was a case recently of a Polish citizen in Ireland who was actually, he had an arrest warrant, and Polish authorities wanted to deport him, but Irish refused to send him back to Poland, and it went into appeal through European Court of Justice, and they also said that we're upholding the Irish decision, because we won't send this person to Poland because their justice system is a bit dodgy. So I have a suspicion what it's about, but I wanted to meet you predominantly just to share with your audience how important it is to have a second passport, and how important it is to have plan B, and because when things happen, you are stuck. I thought about it for years, but I've been traveling. Like I said, I'm a perpetual traveler. I've been traveling relentlessly through Mexico and US and Canada, Spain, and I'm a digital nomad, you can say. I run my businesses from wherever, so I'm not like desperate to go back to Bermuda, but I'd like to be free to travel. I'd like to visit countries and go and see an Acapulco next year, and so the main thing is I spent 3 years in Polish courts, back like 15 years ago because I've got a daughter in Krakow. She's 16 now, and after 3 years of trying to get justice, I achieved nothing. I spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on different court cases, and all I wanted was just to see my daughter and be part of her life, and they literally just completely messed it up, and I ended up not seeing my daughter for 12 years, and I was paying child maintenance, so I think that's something to do with child maintenance. But again, for me as a sovereign man and as an anarchist, I have no business with that country. I've never worked in Poland. I left when I was teenager. I never worked in Poland. I just had a Polish citizenship and Polish passport, but I never contributed any taxes. I don't want to have anything to do with them. In fact, I'm thinking maybe it's a good thing because I should have done it earlier. I feel free, not Polish, so to speak. So, but I looked at renouncing Polish citizenship, and it's also like they treat people like slaves. You have to ask permission of the president to renounce your citizenship. I spoke to some people who renounced American citizenship, and I think it's easier. It also costs money, and it's a procedure, but
They've raised the rates. It used to be free to do, and then they raised it to $1,000 or $2,000. I think it's $4,000 or $5,000 now. And you're supposed to go to an embassy outside of the U.S. and they will do a sort of a question-answer sort of interview. And one of the questions that they'll try to get you to say is that you're leaving because you want to avoid paying tax. Mm-hmm. So don't say that. Mm-hmm. And and there's waiting lists for sure. They don't publicize any of this. Some countries it'll be faster. Some there's like a 4-month waiting list. But no, you don't have to get the permission of Donald Trump to renounce or anything like that. But yeah, this really does point out something that I've always said. And even for people out there, if you're living in the U.S. and you don't even have a U.S. passport, and there's a lot of anarchists I know out there who are like, why should I go get this? I don't want anything from the government. It really is a good option to have. It's unfortunate we need passports to travel, but you really can't travel very comfortably internationally without a passport. It is possible, but you're going to have to be hiding in the bottom of a sailboat and stuff like that. If you're going to arrive at an airport anywhere, they're going to want to see some sort of passport. And so for the Americans even out there who don't even have a U.S. passport, I always suggest just get it, because you never know what's going to happen. Let's say there's another 9/11 false flag attack and they really lock down the country, or there's a huge financial crisis and you just don't want to be there anymore. As long as you've got at least that passport, you have an option to leave. I think they offer 5 or 10 years. I always say get the longest period possible, because you just don't know what's going to happen. And even better, get another passport. As you learned, it would have been so much better for you if you had another one. As it is right now, you basically can't travel. The only place in the world you can travel is Poland, where you might end up in a jail for some reason that you don't even know. So if you had another passport, you just not worry about it, right?
Well, luckily it's been a fantastic summer. The hottest summer on record, so I've enjoyed it very much. I've been to Lake District and Wales and Liverpool, and it's great. And I still run businesses, and I'm meeting people, and it's great. But I'd like to have freedom to travel. You mentioned I've been working with Liberland.
Mm-hmm.
I'm hoping that this country will become. Recognizes maybe the wrong word, but it's like the passport will be accepted for travel. Mm-hmm. So I thought about it for the last 2 years, and I filled my application form, but it's not like you can buy this passport. You have to kind of earn your.
Yeah, there's a lot of people out there asking questions because they all know about Lieberland, and a lot of people have said, oh, I applied for citizenship, I never get it. There's been 500,000 people who have applied, and generally the way it works at the moment is you have to do something for Lieberland, and that could be in the form of investing in something, a houseboat in Lieberland, or setting up a meeting with a local government, which actually you're in the process of doing with Bermuda right now. So if you do anything that helps the country, you will get put to the top of the list, basically. That's the way it's at. So hopefully you'll get your Lieberland soon. Jadlik, if you're watching this would be a good candidate to get one. He has no passport at all right now. And as far as traveling on the Lieberland passport, I've never personally tried it. I've done a few funny things, though. I was in Greece, and I arrived in Athens, and the lineup to get through immigration it looked like at least 3 hours long, and I was like, oh my God. And I saw this one line, it said diplomatic line, and I had my diplomatic Lieberland passport, so I walk up, I show her that, she looks, oh, go right ahead. I didn't use it when I got to the front desk, but I at least got into the diplomatic line, and she didn't seem to ask any questions after that. So I've done things like that, but VIT has apparently used it in numerous countries, and I know of a few people who have, so it is possible. A lot of these countries are pretty archaic in terms of their computer systems, as long as it looks like a passport. There is some risk involved. I've heard it said that if you try to enter a country with a passport that's not accepted by that country, that could be considered a criminal act by them, like you're trying to defraud them or something. So you have to be a little bit careful, but at least if you have that, for now, you can have a chance of it working and see what happens.
Well, what is passport? I mean, from my experience, the world is becoming more and more totalitarian, and there's more and more restrictions. Because why do we need passports to travel anyway? It's like we are free citizens of the planet. The governments are keeping people in confined areas, and they dictate what you can and what you can't do. And it's, like I say, in my situation, there's not even nobody contacted me. I am not hiding. They can contact me via email. They just decided arbitrarily that I owe them money, and they just stopped my passport. So.
Yeah, we're going to see lots more of that. They're really locking things down like that. Passports didn't exist even 110 years ago. It started in 1915, I think. It was right after they engineered the First World War, just like all wars are engineered, to scare enough people to say, okay, because of all this war stuff, we need a piece of paper to see if you're going to travel to different countries. And over time, it just got people used to the point now where people just accept, if I want to travel, I need a passport. And it's unfortunate, but very good reasons to try to get another one. And some of the other ways, just so you know, if you have a sort of a ethnic background or heritage in some country, for example, let's say your grandparents are from Italy, you can probably get an Italian passport. Every country has different rules and regulations, and it's going to be a pain in the ass to get. It's not going to be easy. You're dealing with government bureaucrats, but I always think it's good to have. It's funny as anarchists that I want more passports, not less. In this moment in time, I wish we didn't need them at all, and or at least not government issued ones. There's people working on sort of private ways of identification using blockchain. We're at a blockchain conference here. So any thoughts on blockchain, on how you're here at the conference, how that's changing things? Maybe making it so we can eventually get, like, for example, there's, what's Suzanne Tarkowski Tempelhoff's company, BitNation. They're trying to put sort of identification on a blockchain, but it's not government. So, identifying yourself has some value, obviously. If I want to do business somewhere, you don't know who I am, how do I know who you are? Some way to identify who you are.
But it's a question is going to be recognized by, and when.
Right.
Actually, in Bermuda, there is a company working on the electronic ID verification. And but for me, it sounded a bit like a global kind of thing. It didn't sound kind of like freedom. It was more actually about how we can keep track of people even more, how we can control them even more.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really the case. They are getting, I remember traveling 30 years ago, and it was like no countries were connected to each other's countries at all, and now they're all got their international databases and all this sort of stuff, and they want to know where you are, what you're doing, how long you're staying. Every country now asks, do you have a return ticket out? Basically, you're allowed to go there, but just for a little short period of time, and then you have to go back to your tax farm or whatever it is. And
I had an experience last year actually. I flew to Madrid. I was in Madrid and Gibraltar for a couple of weeks, and on the way back in Madrid, some lady decided that she needs to make sure that I have a right to go back to Bermuda. I was like, hey, I live in Bermuda. It's like, well, what it's got to do with you? Why are you stopping me? And actually, she didn't let me on the plane, and I had to stay in Madrid for 2 more days to sort it out, to change my flight, because some lady decided that she had the authority to question my right to travel back to Bermuda. Unbelievable. Just
Yeah. And this stuff happens all the time now, and it's going to get worse and worse, unfortunately. So yeah, if you don't have any passports, make sure you get at least one. I try to get more than one. It's not that easy. Hopefully Lieberland comes to fruition. We can get more of those and get accepted. I have to run pretty soon. I'm speaking at this conference. Is there anything that we didn't talk about? That you want?
It's great. I'm meeting Vit. He said he's going to be back in London in a few days, so
Okay,
I'm
great.
going to meet him, and hopefully that diplomatic mission to Bermuda is going to happen, so I'm going to earn my right to become a citizen of Liberland.
That's great.
And so thanks for your time, and all I want is just to share this as a warning to other anarchists, and until you experience that kind of thing, you really don't realize how constrained we are. Because I spoke to I've got friends who are lawyers, who are judges, and they said, no, it's impossible. But they don't even know how the system is really inhumane, basically. I mean, I feel like, I don't know if you know Kafka, the trial. I feel like, yeah, so basically this guy was accused of something, and he ended up being executed actually after a year. So I don't want to be executed, you know, I don't want to rock the boat, so hopefully I'm going to get some alternative passports. And
Yeah, hopefully. Anyone out there, if you have any ideas, maybe, maybe you have some ideas of what he can do.
it's a good point, yeah.
Yeah, throw them in the comments down below. Maybe you're, who knows, maybe you're working at some government for some reason, even though you're an anarchist, and you can get him a passport somehow. Anyway, we'll try to figure it out. Yeah,
That's a
always
good
look for
idea.
solutions.
That's a
Always
good
look for
idea.
solutions.
Yeah, I'm up for any passport, any country, any passport.
Yeah, North Korea, doesn't matter. Yeah, so good information, and yeah, they're really locking things down in many ways. And so if you're not aware of it, here's and yet another story: someone just getting his ability to travel cut off, and he doesn't even know why, and doesn't even know what he has to do to get it back, and that's getting more and more common. So you should know about it, but at the same time, thanks to cryptocurrencies and things like that, will hopefully reduce the power of these governments and make the world a much better and freer place. So that's it for Anarchast, your home for anarchy on the internet. Peace, love, and anarchy.
Radio.